Hello and welcome to Westwind, an audio podcast about cancer, technology in medicine, and policy issues. I'm host and medical oncologist Dr. Jack West from the City of Hope Comprehensive Cancer Center in the Los Angeles area. You can find Westwind material at BeaconMedIC, one word.com, at iTunes, or just about anywhere you get podcast content. I would just ask that you show your interest and support by subscribing, commenting, sharing by telling friends and colleagues in person and on social media, and rating it however you feel is appropriate. You can also share your ideas and opinions by emailing us at westwindpodcast@gmail.com. Well, today I'm happy to be here with more of a patient and caregiver perspective. I have two guests with me. One is Chris Draft, who graduated from Stanford, received a degree in economics, and was a star linebacker there, senior captain, and then drafted into the NFL, where he played for 12 years. And during that time, he also founded the Chris Draft Family Foundation. And he became deeply involved with the lung cancer community for reasons we'll get into. And I'm also happy to be joined by a patient here in Southern California who gets treated at the City of Hope Comprehensive Cancer Center by a colleague of mine and the leader of the medical oncology division here, Dr. Ravi Salgia. And this is Tabitha Paccione from Cypress here in the Orange County area. So thanks so much to both of you for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Chris, let's just start with, obviously you have a remarkable background coming from the same area of Orange County, and I believe you were probably always interested in and hoping to play football for a living. Is that right?
Well, definitely. I mean, from a young age, watching it on TV was always exciting. And I saw a guy, his name was Tony Dorsett.
Yeah.
He played, was an amazing running back for the Dallas Cowboys. He looked like my dad. And so the game that's exciting really came down to Tony Dorsett looking like my dad, and that made it that much more exciting. So I said, I'm going to be a football player. And I think, just from that point, I said, man, that's the goal. And as you play the game, you start to understand more of what it actually takes. So at different points in my my young career of starting out at 10 years old, actually playing and realizing, oh my goodness, this is work, and oh my goodness, you're sore. I had to make a clear choice to continue with that. When, again, it's a nice shock to your system of what it actually takes to be able to do. Playing in high school and hoping that everything goes right, because it's a very violent game, and that everything goes right. So at the same time as playing football, being committed, to my academics, making sure that if something happens, if I get hurt, that there's always opportunity.
Yeah. So you went to Stanford, obviously a phenomenal place and somewhere where there's an amazing integration of amazing academics and also a great sports experience, great players, lots of great programs. Rather rigorous, I think. What was part of the decision that you had about going there versus, I'm sure, many other options that might not have been as challenging to balance the time you have to spend on the field and in practices with getting your degree, especially an economics degree?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question. I mean, I'm actually, in talking to youth groups and high school groups and colleges and our players, very often they ask me, so what did it take for you to make academics a priority? And I said, it's not very difficult to see that. I mean, I play a violent game, and that's what I'm saying. It's a violent game that makes it where you should recognize at any time it can be over. And so if you decide that you can be more and you want to be more than just a football player, then naturally you're going to fight academically to be your best. And so I didn't just want to be my best on the football field or on the baseball field. I wanted to be best in the classroom. And so when you put that together, that's really says Stanford. So it was naturally a place to go. And then when you're talking about a balance, the balance of striving for greatness academically and athletically wasn't something new by going to Stanford. That's the reason why I got to Stanford.
Yeah.
And so continuing that was exactly what I wanted. I mean, that was, the goal was to be able to do that and then transition and ideally be able to play in the league, but again, to be more than a football player there and always use that platform as a way to be able to do something else. So there's a greatness of playing, but there's always the greatness of being able to do more.
Let's talk about what brought you into the lung cancer fold. You had mentioned before that prior to Keisha and her diagnosis, you didn't know anything about lung cancer. I think that's really most people's perspective.
Well, what I would say, I think it's very important that it's not that you don't know anything about lung cancer, is that you do know, but you know only what people have told you. And so I know what most people know, and that is that smoking and lung cancer. And outside that, you would think of environmental issues and maybe a coal miner or potentially some air quality issues in certain areas. But it was environmental, or it was more of a smoking kind of environmental type of issue. So it was all about prevention.
Right.
And so the key is, did I know that research mattered in lung cancer? No, because no one told me.
Yeah.
But like so many people out there, unless you tell them directly, they won't.
So you met and started spending time with Keisha around 2006 in the middle of your career
for the Carolina Panthers.
Right.
Yes.
And for several years, she was diagnosed in 2010.
She was diagnosed December 2010, so I was with the Washington Redskins in training camp, and it was my 13th year. I thought I was hoping I'd be able to get that last year, but unfortunately I ended up at home. But fortunately, I was at home. I was a girlfriend at the time. And so before she was diagnosed, she was challenging me to do P90X and run a 10K race with her, just tremendous shape. And
she was a dancer and never smoker.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, never smoked, just in amazing shape. And so 37 years old, so she had a little shortness of breath. And instead of ignoring it and thinking, man, it'll go away, I don't have to worry about it, she went right in with her primary care doc. And because she had a great relationship with him, she got in right away. And then with that relationship, when she said she had a little shortness of breath, he didn't just say, let's just do antibiotics. He said, let's do the antibiotics, but let's go over and get a chest x-ray. And I emphasize that part, because there's two aspects to it that are critically important. And number one is that when Keisha felt that there was something that was wrong, she didn't hide it. She didn't try to ignore it. She went right in and spoke with her primary care doc, and that's critically important. And then from a primary care doc perspective is the relationship that she had. Number one, she came in and she was honest about what was going on, but then through that relationship, the primary care doc followed the symptoms, and in doing that, she got a chest x-ray, and it came back that she had a mass in her left lung.
That must have been like a ton of bricks.
I say the worst news of both of our lives at that time, but it was right at Christmas time. So it's December of 2010, and we end up getting it confirmed that that it was cancer with a biopsy 2 days after Christmas. So I guess the idea of being a ton of bricks is yes, but then at the same time, because it was so different than anything that you would think of, the idea of lung cancer in a 37-year-old woman, that anyone, the idea, I can say anyone can get lung cancer. I can say that. I can say that somebody that's amazingly healthy and strong can get lung cancer. But I would have never said that unless I knew it.
Yeah.
And I know it because Keisha was diagnosed. But before, so I think it was more not just this ton of bricks, but just also at the same time just a complete surprise, where did this come from? And then you come back to a diagnosis of stage 4 lung cancer after a PET scan and MRI.
Tabitha, what was your experience like?
It was very similar to Keisha's. I was 35 when I was diagnosed. I'm an elementary school teacher, so constantly running around. I have 2 young kids. I was probably in the best shape of my life at that point. So in November of 2015, I had a cough. So, same thing. I'm really close friends with my primary care, so I called her up and I said, hey, got this cough and it's not going away. I've tried all the, natural remedies, over-the-counter meds. So I went in and she prescribed me antibiotics, but she also ran a chest x-ray. But when she ran the chest x-ray, there was nothing visible. So she kind of ruled anything out. She said, your lungs look clear, you look great. Let's just try these antibiotics, and if it doesn't go away, come back and see me. And I went back 2 more times. The next time it was allergies, so I was sent home with an inhaler and steroids. And then the next time after that, which was a few months later, it was acid reflux. So at that point, I also developed a really huge thyroid nodule. It was probably the size of a lime on the left side of my neck. And that really forced me to kind of push and advocate for myself. So I saw 2 different specialists, head and neck surgeons, and both of them kind of agreed that it needs to be biopsied. And once that happens, I can just go through the surgery and they'll figure it out, from there. And it came back benign, so they just said, hey, let's go ahead and take it out. And one doctor, however, bless his heart, he thought, I really want to run a CT scan and an MRI, because apparently there's a nerve that runs through up from one side of your brain, because I had a paralyzed vocal cord also.
Right.
And he said, you need to run. Now at this point, I'm trying to teach summer school. I've got kids that I'm running around. I'm completely short of breath. I can't even teach. I had to take my 12-year-old son with me to vocalize everything I wanted to teach my summer school class, because I would run out of voice. So I was just done. I wanted the surgery. I wanted to be, there was no thought of cancer in my mind. But when they ran the CT, it came back a 5-centimeter mass in my left lung. And it was stage 4 adenocarcinoma. And he was sure. He said he had seen tons of cases. I actually can't tell you that day what happened after he said those words, because I basically blacked out. I had never, just like Chris said, I had heard of lung cancer, but everything that I had heard was all the things that we were fed growing up through commercials and billboards and, at school, it's all prevention. It's an older individual that has smoked for years or that has environmental issues that develops lung cancer. Not a 35-year-old soccer mom, an elementary school teacher, someone that was running 10Ks. Those people don't get lung cancer.
Right.
So that day, my parents have a family friend. His name is Dr. Paz over at City of Hope, and he's a colleague of Dr. Salgia. I actually called City of Hope because the head and neck surgeon said, you need to, if it was my wife, if it was my daughter, sister, he told my husband, I would take her to City of Hope. And I tried to get in, and it's an amazing hospital. Everybody wants to come here. So I couldn't get an appointment. The lady was so kind on the phone. I just thought at that moment, this is where I want to be. But she said, honey, I'm going to try to do my best to get you in. And but my parents had a tiny connection, which was Dr. Salgia. And so I went from my head and neck surgeon being told I have adenocarcinoma to that night at 7 p.m. meeting Dr. Salgia.
Wow.
And from that moment, my life has completely changed. So,
can you talk about, obviously you didn't have then a lot of time of wondering what's going to happen, and I don't know if Keisha did as well. Did she have much of a latency period of not knowing and fearing the worst? What goes through your mind, or do you just suspend disbelief and wait to be guided?
Well, I tell you, with Keisha's diagnosis, her primary care doc was amazing. He really jumped on everything as fast as we could do it. So It was, from the chest x-ray, he made calls and said, all right, we got to get a biopsy. So they scheduled a biopsy, and it's Christmas time. So, quick is still, it takes a couple of days, but it's still only a couple of days when we know that those diagnoses can take months for people in getting the final diagnosis. So again, pretty much from the biopsy to a PET scan to the first appointment to an MRI, and then pretty much very, very, very quickly we got to our treatment plan, but it was just going through the process of getting all the things that you have to kind of completely understand before you can put together that treatment. But there wasn't any kind of obstacles within that.
Right. So was your first instinct like rush to the internet and see what Dr. Google has to say, or were you inclined to see what Dr. Salgia or Keisha's doctor in Charlotte at that point?
No, we were in Atlanta. But I think it's very similar when you hear with Tabitha. Is that my wife was in pharmaceutical sales, and so her friends were all docs. So her primary care doc and his partner, another primary care doc, was one of Keisha's best friends. So they took the lead. So we didn't need to go and Google stuff because we had docs that were calling all their friends and finding out what we needed. So if we had any questions, all we do is we just need to ask them. And so I think that's a huge advantage. So when when I talk to folks about having a team and how critical it is that we had one. So we didn't have to worry about that part of the diagnosis because the team was already in place.
Right.
And so we didn't have to go find random information from people because we had people we can talk to directly about it.
And Tabitha, it sounds like the same thing. I mean, it didn't take long, fortunately, for you to get in and see Dr. Salgia. And once you had him in your corner, did you feel like you needed anything else, really?
No. Well, so I only had like 4 hours. The only thing that I do remember is I remember sitting in that office and I remember him saying it, and then the only thing I remember is all these like photo strips just went through my mind. All the things that I was gonna miss. My kids' high school graduations, their weddings, my high school reunion. Just, that was the moment of like, what's next? Like, what do I need to do? And then you kind of snap out of it and you realize, okay, these are the next steps. And once I met Dr. Salgia, I mean, honestly, the only things that I do remember him saying is, and this is what cemented the fact that he was going to be my team, was he said, you know what? I want you to go home. I want you to spend time with your family. And I don't want you to worry. I don't want you to Google, because none of that stuff is up to date. It's all just nonsense. Let me worry about you. Let me take care of you. And so that's what I did. To this day, I have not Googled anything about lung cancer because I have a really fantastic team behind me. And they're not even a team, they're a family. Dr. Salgia is like my dad. Like, I don't feel the need to see anyone else. I don't feel the need to worry because I know that he's 10 steps ahead.
Well, I think both of you express a situation that is not the luxury everyone has of a super specialist or people you can trust because they were the people referred by other docs in the know. I think that as somebody who had started a cancer education nonprofit online, it was less for the people who have a super expert available to them than for the so many people in the country or the world who don't have that, and their best resource is whatever they can find for themselves. But it's a good situation. Tell me about, Tabitha, what it was like to have the molecular testing, because obviously you didn't have that at the time you first met with Dr. Salgia, and he kind of shepherded you through we're going to test for some things that will change potentially how we approach the treatment.
He was very gentle in the way that he approached all of that. I had the MRI, the PET scan, and then I was put on carboplatin and Taxol for one round because the cancer had spread. When I say everywhere, it was everywhere. And he knew that the testing was going to take a few weeks, so he had me put on that first round because I also didn't hear a lot. When he spoke, it was just all kind of, when you're so new to the world of lung cancer, you don't understand the words and you're thinking more with emotion. You're not thinking logically. So I wasn't really paying attention to all the keywords and all the medical jargon. But he was really great about letting me know that there's this special blood test and there's this part of the biopsy. When you do have it, they're going to use some of the tissue and you're going to have a test. It's going to take a few weeks. We're going to send it back east. And then at that point, we'll discuss your treatment plan past chemo. And so I was really hopeful, but once again, I didn't really know a lot. I thought chemotherapy and radiation was the way to go. You just don't. I had no idea oral targeted therapy was even an option.
Do you remember what you thought when he conveyed that you were positive for ALK and that there is a pill-based treatment to pursue?
So I remember the moment like it was yesterday. It was the day before my second cycle, and that first round of chemo was so tough. So knowing that I had to do it again was really, really stressful. And I remember he called me and he said, I just want you to know that you have been given a gift. And you are not going to go through your second cycle of chemo. You are going to be able to take a pill. And I was like, a pill? Wait, what? And he said, the side effects are different. They're far less. And this is going to target just your cancer. And I just felt like I hit the jackpot. Like this was the most amazing news that I'd ever gotten.
Did you go on crizotinib, Xalkori at that time?
Yes,
Okay.
I was on crizotinib for a year.
And that worked during that time?
It did. It worked. So the first scan that I went, the 3-month scan after being on crizotinib, my primary tumor in my lung had shrunk by half. All my bone mets were gone. My lymph, the lesion on my liver was gone. And it had kind of started taking care of my brain mets, but it wasn't quite enough because it wasn't crossing that blood-brain barrier. So during that time, I was on 2 rounds of focal point radiation as well.
And then after that, did you switch because there was progression on the crizotinib?
Yeah, so the crizotinib wasn't quite taking care of the brain mets. Some of the ones that had been reduced by the radiation had come back. So instead of progressing with radiation, he moved me on to alectinib.
Okay. And are you still on that?
I am.
And it's doing good things for you?
It's amazing.
And you're tolerating it well?
I am.
You seem pretty happy.
I'm so happy.
That's great. Chris, can you talk about Keisha's workup? And she was found to have an EGFR mutation?
No, she actually did not have, she was negative for EGFR and ALK. But it's important, though, that when I acknowledge it, again, like these different parts along this process, that's January 2011. And she was tested. Her doc made sure that she was tested.
Right.
Xalkori hadn't been approved yet, and he was testing for EGFR and ALK, crizotinib. And so it's important that it makes it clear as I go around and we're looking at, are they doing molecular testing now, biomarker testing right now at all the places, and you realize anybody that's doing it, that it's just completely unacceptable if January 2011 if it was getting done.
Yeah, I mean, again, this was not ancient history, but the world has shifted so much. We've learned so much. There's so many more treatments, but at least then she was getting cutting edge evaluation.
Well, the evaluation is being tested. Doesn't mean that you're naturally, that it's going to happen. Doesn't mean that she's going to be one of the ones. And so she wasn't. So she ended up staying on the standard chemo, carboplatin and Taxol. And unfortunately, with that, she didn't really respond. So she had radiation, carboplatin, and Taxol, and that's kind of unfortunately how the story can go. She ended up passing a year later in December of 2011, and her experience, it really helps me understand and be appreciative of where other people are and what happens with, because look at every part of our journey and kind of compare that to what's going on to make sure you have perspective. You know, so before my wife passed, we had a chance to get married in November of 2011.
Can I ask about that? Because obviously that must have been a big decision. Yeah. She was pretty debilitated. I saw the videos, which are beautiful, really tearful. I mean, it's amazing. What led to your decision to get married knowing how sick she was and how little time she had?
I think, the key is not looking at it just for how sick, and it's just, it was time. We continued to build our relationship through the process and live. So it wasn't that all of a sudden you got diagnosed with cancer and we're going to say, oh, everything's all jacked up. No, we were going to live and we're going to take it day by day. And so end up, we had a chance to get married. And what was awesome about it, and I think people still have not appreciated fully in terms of what her real commitment is, and I'm hopeful. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I'm still continuing to be hopeful, and that is that what I told you was that we had an amazing team. Her family and friends were close. We lived right downtown Atlanta, are 5 minutes away to Emory University. She's getting the top care, top people that are right there. We have family and friends that are not just family and friends that are supportive. We have family and friends that are all in the medical field that if there is a question, they will find it, right? And so Team Draft was already established in the sense of anything that was fighting for us. That was done. We already had that team. On our wedding day, Team Draft was about my wife's commitment to fight for other people. And that's so critically important that there's a transition, the transition of you're fighting for yourself to a transition to when you're fighting for others. And so on our wedding day, we made 2 commitments, one to each other and one to the lung cancer community. And again, that's what's critically important. That's a hard decision. It's a hard decision that every survivor has to make, right? Are they willing to or not? But it's a decision that we need them to be able to do it because we're going to need everyone. And so my wife, it took a while, but she made it.
Yeah.
And that's what we continued kind of moving forward, is this commitment of fighting for other people. So after she passed, that's what Team Draft stuck to.
It's been 7 or 8 years since then, and I've heard many years ago from an advocacy expert that it's hard to work with spouses because as caretakers, they're deeply committed, but if their spouse dies, they understandably want to move on to a different chapter. That hasn't been your situation. I mean, it's really kind of extraordinary that you remain so committed. So can you talk about that?
What I would say is it's what the doc said is right on. It's right on. If we don't make this space something that is desirable, where someone can feel like when someone passes that they can actually accomplish something, we're not going to have anybody. This past year, I've been very, more intentional of saying that, based on the number of people that we've lost with lung cancer and the number of people that are diagnosed with lung cancer, is that we have a huge army of advocates, of potential advocates. We have an army. But to activate that army, we have to make them feel like it's worth it to do something, to be able to actually stand up. And so I knew that was what the battle was from the beginning. And I had to be very intentional of asking myself three questions before I even got started. And that was, could I accept that nothing that I did, so she passed December 27, 2011, moving forward, there is nothing that I do, nothing we do as an organization is going to bring her back. Nothing, right? Because if that's the case, I'm always going to be disappointed. It's just not going to work. The other one is, can I be excited? So can I be excited for Tabitha? Can I be excited about the changes that are happening? Can I do that? Because it doesn't help her or anybody if I'm mad because, there's an advancement, but it didn't help Keisha, so it doesn't really matter. No good, because I'm hurting the cause now. I'm hurting people. And then the other one, am I willing to fight for it? Because I can be happy, but that doesn't mean I'm willing to stand up. And I think that's the critical element in terms of moving forward. And really, the other side of it is I had a tremendous support system in terms of the NFL. I've had, the Commissioner Goodell was one of the first people to call me after Keisha was diagnosed and after Keisha passed. So have this tremendous resource of the NFL, played on 7 teams, tremendous resources within that. But the key was, how do we use that? So I definitely have a platform. But there has to be a message, and that message has to be seeped in the honesty of really what we need. And that's where when you asked me the question about the lack of awareness, I had to correct that because you're saying that there has been a lack of honesty in the lung cancer community in terms of when we say, people don't know that research matters. And the first, one of the first kind of honest points within lung cancer, if you want to do something about it, is recognizing, of course, people don't know that research matters because we haven't told them.
Right.
And so in changing the face of lung cancer, the critical point was saying that unless we stand up and tell people a message that's different, then they'll never know.
We'll continue our discussion with lung cancer advocacy leader Chris Draft and lung cancer survivor Tabitha Paccione in the next episode. Thanks for listening. The West Wind Podcast is a Beacon Medical Interchange production with sound engineering and distribution by Mark Lindsay of Talking Speaker. We hope you'll be motivated to subscribe, whether at BeaconMedIC.com, through iTunes, or through another podcast service. Please also rate it, and I hope you'll be inclined to tell friends and colleagues in real life and on social media. We're always happy to get your suggestions and other input at westwindpodcast@gmail.com. Talk to you again soon.